I'm guessing that not one of you would be willing to put on a blindfold and get in your car and drive home. Please say no. But what about blinders? Would you be willing to take that drive half blind? You know, I actually wasn't sure what blinders were for. I've seen them on horses before. I'm sure you have too. And so I Googled it. And here's what I learned. I learned that blinders are used to keep a horse from getting scared, from getting spooked by things that are going on around it. And of course, they're most commonly used in areas where there's lots of distractions and things that are going on around them. Well, if you think about it, the horse is literally made to be half blind with their vision restricted so that the rider can keep the horse from being distracted by things that are going on around it and keep the horse on the path that is chosen by the rider, not the path that the horse maybe would choose for themselves. Well, I wouldn't go through my life with a blindfold on, but it occurred to me that I've gone through a good portion of my life wearing blinders. And I want to share with you some of the things that I'm learning as I'm going through the process of improving my vision. And so it starts when we're kids, right? And if you think about it, children are like a combination of a big blank canvas and a sponge. And quickly, they start receiving messages from their parents, their friends, their teachers, the television, messages about what's right, what's good, what's wrong, and they start to take on these images of how they're supposed to live their life and who they're supposed to be as they're living their life. And most of it is for their own good. I mean, we're teaching them to grow up to be responsible, to keep them safe. So we teach them things like don't talk to strangers, to keep them safe. We might also say something to them like, don't expect anybody to give you anything free in life, to teach them to be self-reliant. And that's good, but the problem is kids don't necessarily have any life experiences to buffer what they're hearing. And so if we take those exact same messages into our adult life, with what happens is that those messages literally become like blinders because they can restrict the vision that we have for ourselves and for our life. Because if your vision is broad enough as an adult, what you'll see is the truth is sometimes people do give you things for free. And not all strangers are bad. But yet, if we're not conscious as adults, we can find ourselves marching through our lives, living a life that maybe is good for us, but not consciously and deliberately designed by us, keeping us on a path to avoid all of the distractions that might be around us. So my youngest son is in college, and he's working on a degree in sociology. And he called me about a year ago, and he'd just come out of a lecture on gender issues, and he was really excited about it. And he says, hey, Mom, you know, we just had this lecture, and God, you're a freak. I mean, your success never should have happened. And I'm thinking, okay, my son just called me a freak, but this is good, right? This is a compliment. And we all live for that moment that one of our kids thinks we're cool, and I'm thinking, okay, this is it. This is it. I'm a freak. What he was referring to and what he was talking about is that some of you know that I'm the President and Chief Operating Officer of both the Luxor and the Excalibur hotels and casinos on the Las Vegas Strip, two of maybe the most iconic buildings on the Strip. I was also the first woman to hold that position on the Strip. Thank you. But what you may not know is that I also left home when I was 19 years old, and I had blinders on about what was possible for my life. And so with those blinders firmly in place, I walked out of my parents' house, I got married, dropped out of college, and by the time I was 23 years old, predictably, I was divorced, and I had 2 kids to support on my own, with no job, no money, and no education. Well, because I had this limited view of things that I had picked up in my childhood about what was possible for me, and you think about it, coming from all of the messages that we hear as we're growing up as children about what we can and can't do, what might be good for us and might not be good for us, I had a really limited view of how to solve the situation that I was in. And so I was pretty much destined to stay on the same path that I was on. Moving forward, just like a horse with blinders on, but in a path that maybe might not have been what was best for me. Well, by the time I was 36, I had improved my position, but really only marginally. I had a job. I was also divorced again, and now I had 3 children to support on my own. And so what my son was really referring to and what he had learned in that class is that statistically, women who divorce with children are more likely to find themselves living in poverty than men. And whether they're living in poverty or not, women who divorce commonly experience a decline in their economic status, more so than men do. And I can tell you, I was certainly a representation of those statistics for a period of time in my life. Trust me when I tell you, I know what it's like not to be able to heat your house in the wintertime because you don't have enough money. And I know what it's like to have to take a calculator to the grocery store and still have to put things back because you don't have enough money. But I also know what it's like to beat those odds. And so I want to share with you what I think was maybe the catalyst for that change. But I also want to tell you some important lessons that I learned along the way with that as well. So I was 38 years old, and a friend asked me, "What do you want for your life, Renee?" It's a simple question, and I would encourage you to ask yourself that question. And so I thought about it for a minute, and really beyond being able to pay all my bills every month on time, and maybe I'm the only one that ever did that juggle, and send my children to college, I really couldn't answer the question. And so she gave me an assignment, and it was a really simple assignment. She said, "I want you to make a list of 101 things that you want to know, have, do, or be in your life. And there's only one rule. You can't put anything on the list that's currently within your reach." And so I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be a cakewalk. This is going to be the easiest thing that I've ever done. First of all, I'm poor. Second, I don't have anything. And third, everything is outside of my reach, and so this is going to be easy. So I started writing. But there was a problem, because you see, I had these blinders on that restricted what I viewed as possible for my life. And with that, my ability to imagine things for my life was also restricted, because if it wasn't in front of me, not only could I not see it, I couldn't imagine it either. So I started writing, and I got to 35, and I literally ran out of ideas. But I was determined I was going to complete this list. So in every conversation that I had with someone, I would end the conversation with, can I ask you a question? What do you want for your life? And I started getting ideas from people. And I got some really incredible ideas from people. Now, everything I heard I didn't want. Not everything sounded appealing to me. But I did get some great ideas. And I was looking for things that I could connect with so that I could add those things to my list too. So one person said to me, "You know what I'd really like to do? I want to sleep in a castle." Who knew you could do that? It never would have ever occurred to me. Someone else told me that they wanted to actually go inside a pyramid, not just go to the pyramids. And I thought, that sounds like the coolest thing ever. I'd watched all those Indiana Jones movies. Me too. So I put both of them on the list. Now, I just have to stop for a second and say, if you decide that you want to make a list like this, I just want to tell you, be very, very specific. I've slept in a castle more times than I can count. It's the Excalibur. And I literally go inside a pyramid every single day. My office is at the Luxor. Just be really, really specific about your list. Some of the things were difficult for me to add to the list, but I wanted to, like run a marathon. I didn't envision myself as an athlete. In fact, when I was a kid, my sister was this extraordinary athlete, and I wanted to be exactly like her, but I wasn't. I couldn't, and she still is an athlete, by the way. I couldn't catch, I couldn't throw, I couldn't run. And when we played softball in the neighborhood, my sister was always the first one picked. But she had a rule. If you took her, you had to take me too. And I can tell you, if she hadn't had that 2-for-1 rule, I would have been the last kid picked every single time. And forget about how I felt about that. Imagine how my mother felt watching that play out in the neighborhood. And so she gently directed me towards things that I was good at and away from sports. And so and by the way, that's how it happens, bit by bit. That little canvas starts to fill in, and with that, the blinders go up, and we become restricted about what is possible for our life. And so I wanted to put run a marathon on my list, but I'm not an athlete. I put it on there anyway. Well, it took me about 3 months to complete that list of 101 things that I wanted for my life. And when I looked at that list, let me tell you, it wasn't a bucket list. What emerged was more of a life list. It was a lifestyle that was contained in the pages of that list. And when I read it, I wanted that life. It looked like the most fantastic life that I could imagine. And more importantly, I could actually see myself living that life. And in the moment that I could see myself living that life, in that instant, that life became possible for me. So what happens when you make a list? You start checking things off, right? And that's exactly what I did. I started checking things off. And as I started checking things off, by the way, it was no secret. Well, I mean, let me tell you what happens. When you make a list, when you imagine something big for your life, your view expands, and then you start seeing things and opportunities that you couldn't see before you could imagine bigger. And so I was able to start checking things off of that list, things that I couldn't even imagine just a couple of years earlier. And so just 4 years after creating that original list, when I was promoted to President and Chief Operating Officer out at Prim, the 3 casinos on the California-Nevada border, it didn't surprise me. It surprised a lot of other people. But it didn't surprise me because it was in complete alignment with what I saw for my life and the lifestyle that I wanted to live. And I continued to accomplish things that were on my list, and I got to a point a couple years down the road where almost everything on that list had a check mark next to it. And I decided it's time to take inventory of where I am. And I got to tell you, when I pressed pause for a second to look at that, in spite of all that I was accomplishing and all that I had acquired, I was profoundly disappointed with how I felt. And I couldn't understand why, because my life was so incredible. And it still is. I'm so very grateful for my life, but it didn't feel the way that I thought it was going to feel. So I thought, well, maybe I've hit a midlife crisis. And I know it's hard to believe. But, and I sort of slumped into that for a little while, but I didn't like the way that felt, and so I decided it's time for me to gain some new inspiration, and perhaps I've got these new blinders that are restricting my view, and so I went back to what was comfortable, what was familiar for me, and I created a second list. But this time, when I looked at the list, I didn't feel inspired. In fact, when I looked at that list, it just looked like a lot of work to me. So I changed mediums. I created vision boards. In fact, I made 3 vision boards. And when I looked at these vision boards, I fell in love with them because you see what was represented in these vision boards, there were 3. All these pictures that were all over the place, I didn't get it. I didn't know what they were. But there was one with mountain scenes and people who were hiking and canoeing, and there were cabins lit with little light. I didn't know I wanted a cabin, and so it surprised me that I was attracted to that. Then there were these beach scenes and spas and people doing yoga and cute little cottages on the beach. And then there was one filled with travel destinations and all these exotic locations, and people were sitting around big tables and drinking wine or in bistros, sipping espresso. And when I looked at these boards, I fell in love with them, but I had no idea what they represented or what to do with them. So I just put them in my office and looked at them every day for over a year. Finally, I decided, okay, it's time for me to do something with these boards, but I wasn't sure what to do. And so when I got an invitation to go to Europe with my 2 sons and some friends of ours, I jumped at it because I've got this board with all this travel stuff, and I'm like, okay, this has got to be it, right? I'm going to go to Europe. And it was on this trip that I experienced the perfect evening. We were in a little medieval village on the Camino de Santiago in Spain. And the weather was fantastic. We were sitting outside around this big table, having dinner. There was a giant oak tree and little white lights all over the place. We were drinking fantastic Spanish wines, toasting the day, talking about everything that we had done. And that's when I realized I had never felt more calm, more peace, more connection in my entire life. It was perfect. And then I realized this exact scene is on one of my vision boards. And as I realized that that scene was on my vision board, that's when it all connected for me. You see, the images on that board don't represent things that I want to do or acquire, those boards represent how I want to feel. Things like connection and love, security, calm. Now, I have to tell you, that original list literally transformed my life. I wouldn't be standing on this stage today if I had not created that list, because it expanded my view of what was possible for my life. But that list was never intended to serve as a to-do list to get me to the future. And the truth be told, all of those feelings that are represented in my vision boards, they were in that original list as well. I just ignored them. Or maybe I couldn't see them because of remnants of blinders from my past. And maybe I thought that if I did things and accomplished things that I would feel good. Well, I don't keep lists anymore today. And I don't set goals either. What I do instead is I focus on how I want to feel and doing the things in my life that will cause me to feel the way that I want to feel. And when you think about it, isn't that really the reason that we do things in the first place? Is because we want to feel a certain way? Well, by focusing on the way that I want to feel, life is a whole lot easier. And if the purpose of blinders is to keep you focused, well, maybe all blinders aren't so bad after all. I can't stand here in front of you, ladies and gentlemen, and tell you that I have it all figured out, because I don't. I don't know where I'll be in 10 years, or I don't know where I'll be in 5 years or 3 years. But I do know one thing. For the first time in my life, I'm focused on how I want to feel. And that feels incredible. Thank you.